Hello, my name is Chris Krieger, and I'd like to give my opinions and takes on the state of pro football and how I think things could be done to tweak and make things better. Now, when it comes to pro football, there are a lot of things that are hot topics. The new helmet rule, what is a catch, but those are the easy ones. What I want to talk about are the small tweaks that I think if they fix, pro football would be a little better, because there are some things that it's not just like a 60s or 70s or 80s or old school. These were things that were going on at the start of this millennium that I think if they went back to, things might be better. Number one, Thursday Night Football. Now, Thursday Night Football began in 1978, and it was mostly used as a once or twice a year novelty up through 2005. Ever since 2006, that changed. From 2006 to 2010, Thursday Night Football was a 2-month thing where it didn't start until after October. Ever since 2012, however, it's been an every week thing, and a lot of people complained about it. You know, players don't like having the short adjustments from Sunday to Thursday. It's too short to adjust to a game like football. And fans have complained, bad matchups, mostly boring matchups, mostly predictable, lame outcomes. Games haven't been great. Well, I'm of the theory that if you really want to make Thursday night a novelty rather than a lame rerun, I think they should go back to what they were basically doing, not as recently as 2005. See, Thursday Night Football in 2005 was basically the Thursday night opener for the defending Super Bowl champion and the 2 Thanksgiving games. Now, up until around 2001, there was another Thursday night game. Around October, when the World Series was scheduled differently, they would always have it around. They would schedule around the World Series because this is back when the NFL and baseball rarely went head-to-head. Up through 2001, that was the last time it happened, obviously. Now, in recent years, baseball changed their World Series schedule, so Game 3 is on a Friday and Game 2 is on a Wednesday. So with that in mind, if you're going to change Thursday Night Football, I propose you go back to the Thursday night for the Super Bowl champion, the one Thursday night game between Games 2 and 3 of the World Series, and cut out a Thanksgiving game. Which leads me to number 2, the NFL on Thanksgiving. Now, the Lions and the Cowboys have been on Thanksgiving every year since 1966. The Lions began in 1934, the Cowboys began in 1966. For a long time, some fans used to debate whether adding another game or moving it around would be a good idea. And I think it's an interesting case because I know some people like to see new teams on there, but the games, well, it kind of makes you wish that after the Dallas game and it's 6:30 and you're ready to eat dinner, you're just ready to stop watching instead of having to watch another game, which you don't know if it's always going to be good. Ever since 2006, when the Thursday night third Thanksgiving game was added, the results have been mostly mixed, largely not very good. There's only been one really notably good third game Thanksgiving Thursday night. That was in 2011 with the 49ers played the Ravens in a great defensive battle called the Horror Bowl because you had brothers Jim and John Harbaugh coaching on the sidelines. Now, the following year, that was moved to NBC from the NFL Network, and the results have been very, very mixed since. We've had 6 games, and only one of them has been what I would call thrillingly close. 2012, you had the Mark Sanchez butt fumble. 2013, you had Steeler coach Mike Tomlin tripping Jacoby Jones. 2014, you had Seahawks Richard Sherman eating a turkey at the 50-yard midfield line at San Francisco's then-new Santa Clara Stadium. Shout out to my Seahawk Twitter friends Mookie Alexander and Ramona DKSB17 for that one. 2015, you had Brett Favre's jersey retirement night, but the Bears surprised that was a good game. In 2016, the Steelers blew out the Colts in a game that, unless you were a Steelers fan, shout out to Bias Girl and Bulldog Babe XO, Steeler fans I know. Outside of Steeler fans like those two, other Steeler fans and fantasy football players, that Steelers-Colts game in 2016 was not exactly worth remembering from a neutral perspective. And last year, the Giants and the Redskins played the type of game that was not exactly a 1980s classic. I mean, it was low scoring. It sounds like the type of game that Giants and Redskins fans used to love at Old RFK Stadium. But the defenses were anonymous. It wasn't exactly Lawrence Taylor and Dexter Manley. It was a mostly low-scoring, sloppy game that is seen differently nowadays compared to the old school days. So, my solution for the Thanksgiving? Cut out the third game going forward in the future. Put it back to 2 games because the primetime ratings, yeah, you're trying to get the bump, but is it really worth 3 hours of bad football or boring football or blowouts unless you're a fan of the team? Like the Mark Sanchez 2012 butt fumble game, that was over by halftime, and what was the point of having that game in the first place? Like, a game like that, it would have been better off, like if that was a Sunday afternoon game, it would have been noteworthy, but because it was a night, it's the type of thing that we can't get out of our heads. But of course, the NFL is trying to make money, and of course, it doesn't matter if it's good football or bad football. Football is football is football, and ratings and whatnot. Number 3, I mentioned Thursday Night Football and Thanksgiving football. I'll transition this to Saturday games. Now, in December, for the most part, since the 60s, there have been Saturday night late season games. Up until 2005, it was always a nationally televised game on the main networks, whether it was NBC, CBS, Fox, maybe a Saturday ABC game every now and then. Ever since 2006 on the NFL Network, it's basically been a little different because it's not like, if it was an NFC game, it would be on Fox, or an AFC game, it would be on CBS. Instead, it's on NFL Network, which not everyone has, regardless of affiliation. In recent years, it's been an example, and they're in Saturday prime time, which is considered traditionally a death slot for TV and ratings. My solution to this is simple. Just go back to, if you're going to have 2 Saturday games or a Saturday game in December, it doesn't have to be on the NFL Network. Like last year, you had a Saturday doubleheader of Bears-Lions and Chargers-Chiefs, both on the NFL Network. Bears-Lions, you can move that game to Fox and move the Charger-Chief game to ABC. Plus, it might get a better bump if it was on that instead of the NFL Network, which, again, not everyone always has. Another Saturday issue is with the playoffs. Ever since January 2002, the playoff games on Saturday have moved. Now, from about 1970 up until January 2001, it was always a 12 o'clock and a 3 o'clock start on Saturday for the divisional playoff and wild card rounds. Now, they moved it to increase ratings, but again, it's been a mixed bag. I mean, the first one was the famous Raiders-Patriots tuck rule game. Sorry to any Raider fans, I know if I had to mention it, but it was technically the first one. And other games since then, it's been mixed bag. I mean, there have been some good Saturday night playoff games. The Romo botch snap, the Steelers-Jaguars a couple years back in the day. But for the most part, they're the type of games where you kind of wonder, wouldn't you rather have this at 12 o'clock or 3 o'clock rather than a waste of Saturday night? And for those of us north of the border, wouldn't you rather watch Hockey Night in Canada instead of having the channel flip for some potentially lopsided playoff game that is not worth knowing unless you're the fan of that team or you're a ratings NFL person? My solution, go back to 12 o'clock, 3 o'clock starts for for Sunday in the wild card and divisional playoff rounds. Leave Saturday nights open to those who would rather find other stuff to do, like watch hockey or college basketball instead of, trying to watch some 3, 4, 5, 6 seeds or 1 or 2 seeds that are not as good as you think they are. And speaking of that, the last time an NFL playoff Saturday ended before 7 o'clock, December 30th, 2000. That is also the last time the day we had NFL playoff games before January. Even in this millennium, things have changed. And it also makes you wonder. I mentioned Thanksgiving, I mentioned Thursday, I mentioned Saturday. I'll mention another interesting thing. Everyone talks about the catch rule, but I feel that if you really want to make things a little easier, they need to do something the college game does. If you have 1 foot in bounds like college, I think it should count because, with the 2 feet, it makes things a little complicated. In college, it's a little less complicated. The NFL tries to make things more complicated. And if you want to make it less complicated, I think this might make things a lot easier. My last issue is, in recent years, this year, we had a revelation. Now, ever since 2002, when the last game of the year used to be on Monday Night Football, they moved it for obvious reasons, for playoff travel. Like last year in 2002, the 49ers played a Monday night game against the Rams, but they had to play a wild card game the following week, and that got moved to Sunday. And with Saturday situations, you don't want to have a team traveling on Monday to play a game on Saturday. So since 2003, the last game of the year has been a Sunday night game. The problem, though, is that while there are years where you can get great situations, like it's a winner-take-all, but last year showed that if it doesn't happen like that, things can get hairy. And it was on New Year's Eve, which is traditionally a ratings death slot, hashtag college football playoffs, unless it's New Year's Eve programming. Last year, what they did was, because you had no winner-take-all games, and you didn't want to risk a situation where Team A had everything to gain, Team B had nothing to gain, as we saw with the Bengals and Jets way back when on a Sunday night, when the Bengals had nothing to play for and the Jets had everything to play for, and it was a 37-point blowout. What the NFL did was, they went back to the old school. No primetime games. The Sunday afternoon games, last day of the season, New Year's Eve 2017, they loaded up the late slots for all the playoff meaningful games, and it worked out. You had a lot of drama with the Carolina, Atlanta, and New Orleans jostle for playoff spots, and the Bengals and the Bills and the Chargers. You remember that game? You had teams fighting for playoff spots. Tennessee won their way in. San Diego got knocked out. It was down to Baltimore and Buffalo. The Bengals were playing spoiler for Buffalo, and it probably one of the most dramatic late season final game moments, a la Rogers Cup 2013 or the Nate Poole Miracle of 2003. The Bengals completed a fourth down conversion to knock the Ravens out of the playoffs and put Buffalo in the playoffs for the first time since 1999. It created a great moment of great drama because it not only was it so dramatic, it was like the Premier League we were watching and all this stuff, and because there wasn't a game looming later that night, it was a finality moment that would it have felt the same if there was some other winner-take-all game that just, hogs all the spotlight to itself. Like in recent years, it was winner-take-all for a playoff spot or a division. It's great and all, but sometimes when you see all the playoff spots move in, it makes things a little more simpler. Like the old days when you would watch the last Saturday of the season and you're just, watching and scoreboard watching and all that stuff just to see what would happen. Sometimes simpler is better. Like, let me throw an example of this. In 1997, the Jets and the Lions played on the last game of the season, and the Jets were playing to put themselves in the playoffs, and the Lions were playing to put themselves in the playoffs. The way it worked out, but in there before flex scheduling, that was a big gamble. And throwing that you had Miami and New England and Washington and Minnesota, all these teams were involved and everyone was watching, kind of like this year with the Bengals and the Bills and the Chargers and all the NFC South teams. It was a really great situation and made for a lot of great stuff. I mean, Andy Dalton, Bengal quarterback, is probably almost as beloved in Buffalo as he is in Cincinnati because he put Buffalo into the playoffs for the first time since Vancouver had an NBA team. And it makes you think about things with the state of pro football, and I know they're trying to make money, but sometimes I feel that simpler is better. Like, Thursday night games should be limited to the kickoff, the night between the World Series games 2 and 3, 2 Thanksgiving games. Saturday games should go back to just on the main networks, not the NFL network. They should change the playoff schedule because with the Saturday night playoff games, as I mentioned, A, they've been mostly blowouts, and B, the matchups haven't been stellar. Like, look at the last 2 years. The New England Patriots playoff games at night against the Texans and Titans were not exactly instant classics, and it makes you wonder why they didn't switch it up around. The theory is Patriots equal ratings, Brady, Belichick, but consider this. Since this Brady-Belichick era, the Patriots had never played an early Sunday 12 o'clock playoff game. All their divisional playoff games have been either early Saturday, or late Sunday. And considering some of the opponents they've had, you think they would have scheduled a little smarter, give the other ones a chance because, Texans and Titans recently, like the Titans-Patriots game this past January was the type of game that it feels like it should have been at 12 o'clock, and maybe they should have moved up Falcons-Eagles to later, or you could move Jaguars-Steelers up, because with the late and the early slots, it makes for some unpredictable stuff. Now, sometimes they always have to do this for weather. Like, Jaguars-Steelers was a very, very good playoff game this past January, but because it was an outdoor game in cold Pittsburgh compared to a dome place like Minnesota, #Minneapolis Miracle, it would have made for some logistical issues, and ironically, the Jaguars and Steelers played a 45-42 game, but yet later that day what happened with the Minnesota-Minneapolis Miracle overshadowed it. So those are my takes on football. Some simple tweaks I think would make the game a lot better. Now, there are some people I follow on YouTube on Twitter actually, that have some YouTube channels that are doing very well, and hopefully I can follow in their footsteps. Steve Dangle and his Maple Leafs game reaction videos, Dodgers Randy Radcliffe and her LA Dodger home game reaction videos or occasional road trips, and You're a Dating Tree with his hilarious sports takes on stuff like Spanos and why Pecorino is just too good right now. Hopefully, maybe someday, I'll come up with something that will be as memorable as I just think Pecorino is too good right now. So, I have a blog, chrisksports.com, if you want to check out my takes on some old football stuff and other sports stuff. If you want to follow me on Twitter, I'm at #Chris S. Krieger, International House of Bills fan. I'm also on Facebook and Instagram at Chris K Sports. Thank you, and good night.